Alright, today I'm gonna do a video on why it's so hard to troubleshoot a Blackcat amplifier, especially trying to help somebody else out with them. The problem is Blackcat use many different configurations on how to run the amp. These amps are Tetrode, meaning they're not grounded grid, and the tube has a screen grid. If you see on pin 4, let me see if I can get a pointer or a screwdriver or something here. See on pin 4 there, it has 366 volts on it. That's the screen grid, and consider that like a turbo boost for the tube. That gives it, higher gain and higher output. And if you bias it properly, and you need bias with that turbo on, because running it without bias, the tube would just run away and destroy itself. But anyway, Blackcats run it Tetrode. This is a JB-150 here, and they got that screen, which is pin 4, and they got 366 voltage. Actually, they got half the plate voltage. The plate voltage on the top on pin 3 is 735, and they use the center tap for the screen on this one. On some of them they use the plate voltage, and they put a dropping resistor on there to drop it down. Some of them they use neon bulbs to regulate it or to drop it. They use probably 25 different versions of the thing that I know of, at least. Also, if you look here where it actually says bias, this one is showing 64 volts of bias in transmit and 37 volts of bias in receive, which if you're using it as an amplifier, it doesn't make any sense at all. But what this was this is the version of a JB-12 RB, and the RB stood for receive booster, and Blackcat made this or sold this as a receive preamplifier to get past the FCC. It was just a trick or a gimmick to get past the FCC. So if you got one that was actually configured like this, you plug it in and turn this amp on, you would find out that you get a little bit of gain in the receive, and you would transmit, you got nothing. It's just straight through and transmit. And if you know anything about schematics, if you look on the top here, this is your input coming in, and then when you're in transmit mode, that relay closes because you're transmitting, and the power just goes straight around that loop, and that relay is closed. This is the output side, and it goes right out to the output. So if you left it configured like this, one of these to get past the FCC, it would do nothing for the transmit, and it would be on and amplifying for the receive. However, it'd be running really hot, the way they got it biased. It'd be like having it in transmit with the key lockdown when you're receiving on it. And I had these schematics out to show you. See how this one, the bias is 64 volts and 37 volts, and here's another one for the bias is 32 volts and 16 volts. And here's a JB-12, but just showing different 40 volts minus 30 volts. Another problem you had with these so many configurations, this one here used 2 zener diodes to get the voltage for the bias. Some of them use just the 1 zener, and for the high bias or the high voltage, they just connected it directly, and they didn't use that second zener. And then other ones, which I don't have a schematic for, the bias was just 1 voltage. It wasn't, going through the relay, for different bias of transmit and receive. But what they did, though, is they used the relay to cut on and off, or, during transmit, to turn on and off the screen voltage, that 366 here. So that 366 would come out the power supply, you know, down here, the center tap of the power supply, the 366, and then that would go to the relay. And during standby or receive, it was not getting any voltage up here to the tube, and then when you transmit, it would go to the relay contacts would close, and you would get 366 to pin 4 here. But like I say, most versions they switched the bias with the relay here. So unless you know which version you're working with, whether you're switching the bias or the screen voltage, you know, you got to know what you're messing with if you're going to play with one of these amps. This one here is one that switches the screen voltage. These are the power supply caps, the bleeder resistors here on top. And if you notice this red wire here, small red wire, that's the voltage that goes to the relay over here. Yeah, it's hard to see because it's kind of inside and out. And then out the relay, if you see this resistor here, that's a resistor, 100 ohms, so you know, pretty low, that is connected to the screen grid of the tube. So on this one, the screen bias is switched, not the screen bias, but the screen voltage is switched. And on others, most of them, it's the negative bias. You got two values of bias that are switched, and they use many different configurations to get the bias and the voltages on them. So it's hard to know which one you're dealing with, but know that when you're in transmit, you should have about half the voltage on the screen, full plate voltage on the plate, and you should have two. You have a negative bias on the input side, which in the JB-150 is that pin 5. On this one, where the screen is fixed, it switches to bias, and it has 64 on the receive, which cut everything off and make the tube happy when it's in standby or receiving, and 37 in transmit, which will, you know, is enough to have the tube conduct and operate during transmit. But Blackcat used many different voltages and biases and configurations. So hence, without having one in front of you or seeing, you know, the ins and outs of it, it's hard to help somebody or tell somebody what they need to do to fix these things, because it's hard to figure out, you know, first of all, what configuration you have. This over here in this corner is the negative bias circuitry. This is a cap. I don't know if you can see that indentation, but that's the positive side going to ground because it's negative bias, and then the diode, having a brain moment, the diode in there, the power diode, with the negative side going to the negative side of the cap. And then it's got the zener diode here to regulate the voltage. It pulls it down to 37 or whatever the voltage is set at by that zener diode. So that's how that negative bias works. And that negative bias goes to the input side through that choke there to keep that negative voltage off the RF, and then it goes to the input tuner. And the input tuner, you know, mixes with your input signal when you transmit it, and then it goes into the tube on the input. But that's the basics of it. But I just wanted to say it's hard to play with the Blackcats when you know, you don't know which configuration you got, or somebody asks me a question, you know, like, what should I have here, or what voltage should I have there? It's like, well, it's hard to say. I don't know which configuration you got. Blackcats are a different animal than the grounded grid, and you know, that's why they swing. They got that screen voltage, and they do have that negative bias. And Blackcat says they're biased for AB1. Other people say no, they're noisy, you know, harmonic generators. They're biased for C. I don't really know, don't really care. I know they do what they're designed to do. They put a lot of swing in your thing. But anyway, that's it. Oh well, I had one more thing. This here is actually the back of a manual that came with some of the amps, about it being a receive booster, and I'll try to go slow so you could read it. And it's saying, you know, receive booster has gain on the receive, use 3 foot longer of coax. And then it gives you a quick basic pin out of the relay. And when you're using it as a receive booster, don't transmit with it off, because it's going to send your input signal into the signal of the amplifier, or the components of the amplifier. And with the amplifier off, you're going to have a very bad input SWR, and you might blow your radio. So as using it as a receive booster, which nobody does, don't transmit with it's off. Now it's showing you the relay configuration of the receive booster. And if you notice here, this is the configuration which it gives you of using it as an amplifier. So basically they're telling you, you got this, and if you want to convert your receive booster into a amplifier like the old, I guess this one's a JB-12 was, and other ones, JB-150s had this also, that you change the relay around. Like if you see pins 4 and 6, the straight wire going across them, and over here the straight wire goes across pins 1 and 3. So you would change that. And on this relay here, if you see that silver bare wire, that pin 1 and 3 on this amplifier here is hard to see with, but it goes underneath to that pin there. And also the input and the output are reversed. Input is 7, output is 8, because you're amplifying the input side, and then of a receive amplifier, and on a amplifier you're amplifying the output side. So over here it's reversed, pin 7 and 8. Pin 7 is output, pin 8 is input. Well, over here is just the opposite. So you would switch them two around to convert this receive amplifier, RB, into a regular linear output on the output side. So tricky stuff, eh? But anyway, that's it on my thoughts on the Blackcat amps. Have a good day. Oh, by the way, be careful with these. As a kid, when I didn't know what I was doing, now this one is off and unplugged, no power to it, drain, bleeder resistor. But as a kid, I had one, JB-12 I think it was, or no, it was a JB-150, and I was playing with it. Wasn't working right, and what it was set up to be a receive booster. I bought it new, and you know, it was sold as receive booster, and at the time I didn't have any electronic knowledge as a kid, and so I was playing with it to try to figure out what was wrong. And even in receive, since it was amplifying, you know, it's getting really hot, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's getting hot? And I had it on, and I had it keyed down with a D104 in one hand, and I was poking around with my finger in the other, you know, kind of like this, and I knew not enough to touch. Now mind you, I had it keyed down, and I saw like that thing arc to me. That's the plate voltage right here. I had my finger about like this, trying to feel heat without touching. That thing arced to me, you know, through my chest, you know, and out the other hand, which was holding the D104, and almost killed me. I probably woke up an hour later, and hands burned and singed, and the hand that was holding the D104 wasn't in it, but I couldn't physically open that hand for a couple hours. It was, you know, just stuck closed. I had got shocked good. I thought somebody had came, you know, into my little radio room and bashed my head in, back of my head in with a baseball bat. Is what it felt like. So anyway, be careful with it. And now it's a little JB-12, or no, 150. If it was a bigger amp, probably would have killed me. And like I said, I wasn't touching it, and I was, you know, too stupid back then. With it on, D104 in one hand, made a good ground, and that thing arced to me and almost killed me. So be careful in there. That's about it for this one. Bye.